Little Johnny Chronicles number 10. This is the Troll Series 5.0. So continuing on my tirade on the fucking troll. I took a break yesterday. I wanted to get to this, but I simply didn't have a chance. And honestly, I'll be 100% honest. I was lazy. I didn't want to fucking do shit. But let's get to it. So if you're listening to this and you have better things to do, go do that. You got to get after it. I need you to think of your top 3 priorities right now. And if this has nothing to do with that, and you don't have the time to fucking sit down and scroll and do this shit, get after it. Think about what's important right now. And if you could find something, think of something more important than this, go do it. Next. So today's trolls, we're going to discuss the landlord and the tenant. They each have their own distinctive qualities as far as being a troll. They are, at least according to my outline, kind of have completely different characteristics. Their motives are different, and we'll get into it. So what I discovered when writing down the list of the trolls, the landlord and the tenant, I think it's something that was just readily apparent that maybe I was overlooking, but the troll is really made up of sub-trolls. And so all these malevolent characteristics are basically nested inside one of the other. So for example, the landlord can also be a creeper. And if you think about it, the creeper is a troll in of itself. So this nesting begins, right? And so you can see quite quickly how you or anybody who falls victim to trolling behavior, of your own trolling behavior, can quickly start to branch out and become a troll in way more aspects than just the primary one. So I think I'll have to write something up on that, maybe, because I tried to categorize it before I started the series, but it just wasn't readily apparent. And now that I'm discussing it and putting a lot more thought into it, because I'm writing and thinking about this a lot, like the thoughts just keep coming at this point, which is cool, right? That's what happens when you start to invest yourself in a thing. The more time you spend on it, the more time your brain will naturally start to inject ideas or develop ideas on its own, which is pretty cool. So pick something and go get after it. That's why I'm telling you that. So the landlord, let's fucking start talking shit. I have a lot of respect for people who are willing to put their house on the market and rent it out to a person. When I'm talking about our abusive landlords, so if you're a good landlord, if you try your best to put your best foot forward, regardless of mistakes, there will always be conflict. But if everybody's doing their best to resolve their differences, doing their best to solve the problem, putting their best foot forward so that both sides try to find some sort of agreement based, regardless of what the conflict might be, that's not an issue. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a landlord who's abusive. The first characteristic of the landlord I came up with is the creeper. So as I was just doing some initial cursory investigation as to what abuses landlords can inflict on their tenants, I wasn't necessarily surprised. I just never looked over there in any type of depth to see what kind of abuses the landlords inflict on their tenants. And one of them is being the creeper, showing up, being caught mowing the lawn at 9 at night, trimming weeds at 6 in the morning, really under the guise of doing some maintenance, but really supervising, seeing who's coming, who's going, whose cars are parked in the parking lot. I mean, come on, man. So you have that landlord who operates in a state of constant surveillance, and I'm assuming that there's something wrong with the landlord. He or she cannot relinquish trust of that physical structure, even though by allowing somebody to sign a contract and a lease, they've done exactly that. They've leased out, sold time related to their house to somebody else, and that gives the tenant certain rights. And we're gonna get to the tenant, so don't worry about it. We're gonna talk shit about them too. And so, as the landlord, you just gotta have faith, because that's really what it is you just have to have faith that the tenant is gonna act responsibly. And what that does is it frees up the landlord, the troll, right? Instead of trolling your tenants, it frees you up to put other controls in place to ensure that doesn't happen. Research better insurance. Ensure that you have the proper insurance characteristics to cover your losses if somebody wants to act a fool. If you have a problem with people being in your house, or the number of tenants, and you want the number of people, and you want to manage that, you probably just should live there. Why have a place that you rent out to others so you can just go over there and fucking harass? It makes no fucking sense. Just fucking live there if it's so important to you. People need to live their lives, and you're being completely intrusive by being a fucking creeper. Not just that, but you can transpose the creeper, and if you put him somewhere else, he seems or appears even more malicious. You can't be creeping on your neighbor's house, because that seems even more creepy. It's the same fucking thing. I don't care how you cut it. Even though you own the house, it's not technically it's your house, but you've leased it out. So the dwelling, although you're the owner, you aren't the resident. So you're showing up to somebody else's house, logically, not technically, but logically, you're showing up to somebody else's house and being a fucking creeper, potentially a pervert, just depending on what you're observing and what's going on. And you could become an accident pervert depending on what the people are doing and your bad timing. It's all bad timing. You shouldn't fucking do it. Stop being a troll. Fucking creep. All right, the enforcer. What other troll characteristics are assigned to the enforcer? He's the guy that writes up the contract with strict rigidity and guidelines, or maybe not, right? Maybe the relationship begins uncontentious and the lease is written in good faith and everybody goes on about their business. But as time goes on, the landlord wants to ensure that the rules are being enforced and that the tenants are adhering to all the rules and policies that are contained in the contract and your lease. And so what they do is begin driving by, and all of a sudden the grass is too high. Oh, the grass is too high. What other things are amiss or awry? And so what happens is they start to look for violations of the law, the code, the contract, the black and white of it. And they start to nitpick. Look, we can find fault in anything and anybody at any time. Nothing and nobody is perfect. I don't have a problem with a landlord who simply is trying to take care of their property and drives by to inspect on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. But I'm talking about a true harasser, a person who shows up to lay down the law at the most inappropriate times. Motherfuckers coming out the shower and the landlord's in the living room. Like, what the fuck are you doing here? Oh, I'm here to make sure everything is good. And of course, your landlords probably should give you 24-hour notice before they enter the building. Sometimes it's 48. It should be in the lease. But I assume some landlords try to sneak in provisions against unsuspecting tenants, young tenants, inexperienced tenants, people in a hurry, people going through traumatic events who are signing a lease. They probably shouldn't enter a contract when you're not, functioning properly up there. Something's happened, but life happens, right? And you have to move, and you have to sign a lease or agreements, even no matter what state of mind you're in, because life's happening in real time. And so what they'll do is probably sneak in a provision. I can come in there anytime I want, and because we're in a hurry or we don't understand the legalese of the lease, and we get bored and dulled to sleep by the fucking verbiage, we just quickly start to overlook all that stuff and just sign the fucking thing. Because again, the enforcer maybe isn't readily apparent, but they become readily apparent as you start to exercise a contract in the form of them showing up to enforce the silliest of regulations and rules that, basic rules that apply to the tenant, but at the most inappropriate time with inappropriate frequency. They're just being a dick. They have no control over their lives. They need to find something to master, and it shouldn't include you, the tenant, but because they're bored, they have some unhealed wounds, you're the target, and it's probably because that's their biggest financial investment, and they see it as the most important thing, and it allows them to justify all these types of behaviors. Yes, owning a house is very expensive, and it's a lot of responsibility. So if you get the opportunity to do that, you'll start to understand quickly how important it is to keep it up, to keep it maintained, that nobody else is going to give a shit about it as much as you do. And the minute you stop caring about the maintenance of your home, how quickly systems in your house can degrade. You can get mold, you can get infestations of different things. You can, your carpets and your floors, wood floors can go to shit without the proper care and maintenance. The plumbing, the drywall, the paint, the roof, the landscaping, I can keep going. But if as a homeowner, you probably instantly, it's when you sign the contract for your mortgage, you instantly gain probably what probably equals a ton of thought immediately, because all these things are your responsibility now. So it's much different being a homeowner than a home renter or a tenant. You shoulder all the responsibility. So it is important. It is important that people adhere to the contract, to the lease, and don't, you hope that they take care of your property. But you do have provisions in place, and it's not even a weekly or monthly inspection, or even quarterly, because people sign the lease for their privacy as well. I mean, that's part of the deal. And so inspection iterations probably should be every 6 months to a year, because a lease, unfortunately, on behalf of the landlord, is based on faith. You just have to have fucking faith that these people are going to do the right thing with your home, because they could move in the first day and burn the shit down. But if you've done your vetting, you check the credit score, which is not always, the best indicator, but that's what we got right now, of who's going to be a good tenant. You meet them in person, you do the interview, you have questionnaires, and you do the vetting, etc., the background checks, and you hope you get a good tenant. Even with all that, they could burn your shit down on the first day if you're not careful. But there's also the other extreme, where I'm not too cautious, but I'm overly cautious. And now I'm infringing upon my tenants' boundaries and if really impacting their quality of life, because we're starting to stress them. And if you're the tenant, if you're on the receiving end of that, absolutely your fucking landlord is a troll. Nobody wants to come out of the shower or come out the door and the fucking landlord is standing there like a fucking like a statue, just there to enforce the law. We don't need security guards, dude. I paid the fucking lease. I'll lock the fucking door. I'll try my best to take care of your shit. Get the fuck out of my face. I paid you the rent, didn't I? The minute I don't pay it, then you can show up. But until then, fuck off. Fuck control. All right. Next is the saint. I came across this as I was reading this morning, because I really was having trouble developing things, because again, I haven't been a landlord, and it's been a long time since I rented a home. So I've kind of out of touch with this stuff. But I came across this one where the landlord tries to paint themselves as a victim in every situation. And when it comes time to go to court or file that police report or complain to family and friends about their tenant's activity, they try to blame the tenant for everything, and in turn make themselves a victim for anything wrong that the tenant does. And in reality, the fucking landlord is the one instigating everything, instigating all the problems, injecting drama, the drama queen, becoming a different troll. Remember, these things are just fucking start to nest under each other. And so as you go through your trolling behavior, you start to accumulate titles, and that makes you a bigger troll. And a bigger troll simply is more destructive, is uglier, and people see you coming, and maybe not. Maybe that's the problem. We haven't done a good job of identifying the trolling behavior, and so when we see it, it probably seems benign, but it's a cancer. It's malignant as fuck. So when these so-called victims come and try to paint the picture, the tenant is left on the hook to prove that they're in the right and that the fucking landlord is in the wrong. And if the landlord has more money or more power, or has already spread the seeds of discontent, and everybody else has their victim, the point of view that the landlord is a victim, it's harder for the tenant to plead their case. And if you're the ultimate hypocrite in that type of way, where you're trying to paint yourself as a saint, but you're really the devil, oh, fucking troll. expert level troll. Not even expert. That is just devious, and nobody likes you. I'll tell you that right now. So don't be a fucking troll. Don't try to pretend to be a saint, and you're really the devil. Because once it's discovered, you'll never recover. And I assume trolls like that don't give a fuck about their reputation. But if that's you and you care about what people think of you, because maybe you should a little bit, because you know there's such a thing as reputational harm, don't be a fucking troll. Next, the businessman, businesswoman, quote unquote. This is the troll who, because they have a piece of property or 2 or 5, they think they're Bill Gates, they think they're Donald Trump, they think they're God's gift to real estate. And because of that, they know all the rules, they have the best contract, their property is more important than anybody else's. Their investment is of the utmost importance, not just in their life, but they try to convince you that it's the most important investment in your life too. Bullshit. You know, I'm your tenant. I will take care of your house as best I can, but I'm not here to manicure it to your level of satisfaction. I'll do what's in the contract. Keep the grass cut, keep the edges trimmed, keep the weeds from coming up if that's what my job is. But I'm not gonna get out there on my hands and knees with scissors to fucking curate your lawn. I'm fucking sorry. Fuck you. If that's the standard, you pay for it. And that's usually what happens. Build a fee into the rent. But people don't want, you know, the businessman. Well, I don't want to increase the rent because that would limit the amount of people who are interested in my property, because you know high rent scares a lot of renters away, or potential renters away, and so they keep the dang rent low without wanting to invest any money in the property, while wanting you, the fucking tenant, to make sure it looks immaculate at all times, because you got to protect their property, because they're a business person and they protect their assets. And you know what? I don't mind people pretending to act in a role what they want to become, because a lot of the time, that's how we become something. Sometimes we just have to fake the funk. I'm doing it here, right? I want to be an orator. I want to be, really what it is, I want to be a writer. And so what I'm doing here is I'm using this platform, this troll series, to help me develop my writing skills, because you can't see the paper. I mean, it's right here. But one of the exercises I'm running through is I'm writing my outlines. I'm figuring out how to write the outline and develop the subtopics for each one of the major components. So for example, I'm talking about trolling. So what are the categories of trolling? These are the roles, right? The landlord and the tenant. And beyond and below that, what's nested is the characteristics. And so what this exercise is designed to do is to help me develop the outline, so I can get really sharp about developing the outline, so I can work harder on the content instead of just the major ideas. It'll help me get to this part faster. And I know what I'm doing is I'm just pretending to be an expert, not an expert, but to know what I'm talking about. I'm not pretending. I kind of know what I'm talking about here with most of this stuff. Hopefully I'm not making too many mistakes, but I'm pretending to be the person that I want to be in order to get there. And in the process, it's making me a better person. So there's nothing wrong with a better art writer. So there's nothing wrong with pretending to play the role, as long as your intent is pure, right? There's an intention behind it. But if you're playing the role and operating in just absolute ignorance and not trying to learn what all the things that you're actually supposed to be trying to learn, as you fake the funk, you fake your way to success, you're being a troll. And that's no different than the businessman, businesswoman troll when it comes to landlords. I would, you know, being a landlord is a huge risk, and it is very stressful. So I understand how you might make mistakes. You might have a lot of balls to juggle and you're learning the ropes. What do I charge in fees? Do I charge a pet deposit? What's my market condition? How much do I charge? Am I charging too much? Am I charging too little? Because you could charge too little. Am I covering all my expenses? What systems do I have to worry about? Is anything on the fritz? I mean, the list goes on and on of the things that the responsibility the landlord must take on in order to ensure he has a decent enough dwelling for people to live in it. But in that vein, you should learn what all those responsibilities are. List them out. Know which ones you're falling short on. Don't be an ignorant troll and know you think you know everything simply because you're pretending to, and you have the title, right? As soon as somebody signs a lease and goes into your house, and you're renting it to them, they become your tenant, and you become the landlord. You're bestowed with that title, whether you like it or not. And of course, I think everybody understands how that works. But that comes with all those responsibilities. Not being a creeper, trusting that the schedule you put to enforce the rules, right? An inspection every 3 months, every 6 months, every year. Some people have an inspection every year. You have to have confidence that your systems are going to work, and you have to have faith that they will. And when they don't, you also have to have faith that you put all those things in place to mitigate the risk. Your insurance policies, and things to that effect. Your cleaning crew. You have to have a contingency plan for when things go wrong, and not be upset when they do, because guess what? They will. And so, the troll doesn't embrace any of those things. They got the title. They're gonna pretend to be the landlord, like they saw Mr. Roper be on Three's Company. Who for the people that know what that is. But generally you're just being a fucking pain in the ass because you're ignorant and you won't learn anything. But if that's not you, great. But if it is you, fucking troll. Next, the harasser. And so this troll, this landlord type of troll, is just there to harass. They take pleasure in it. They're masochists. Like, they don't have nothing else interesting in their life other than to show up to their tenant's place and create havoc. The harasser tends to, again, nesting, right? Tends to take on the characteristics of every single troll. They can be a creeper. They also like to enforce policy. They also, when something goes wrong, it's not their fault. The tenant's a piece of shit, which, of course isn't going to be true. But they're also the business person, and look at what I've done. Look at how much money I got, etc., etc. But they don't want to do any of the work. All they are there to do is harass, because I don't know, maybe that's the only part of their life that it has significance. Well, if it is, then the parts of your life that has significance, you're supposed to nurture. You're supposed to take care of. You're supposed to improve. But instead, you're there harassing your tenants, being a general asshole. The other troll, right? Asshole. You could reach asshole levels of proportion as a landlord by misbehaving, by being a creeper, by showing up at inopportune times inappropriately, by the way, and just being a general nuisance to your tenant, and not letting them live the life that they possibly could if you would just stop being a troll and get the fuck out of their lives. I think we've got that one done. So let's move on to the tenant. And the tenant, in my opinion, is a little bit more destructive than the landlord. Why? Because most landlords understand that having a house is a big responsibility. And so a lot of them are going to do a lot of due diligence to take care of that structure, to take care of the physical place, but also try to keep the tenants happy so that they don't get bad ideas or have bad intentions, or are more incentivized to also help the landlord take care of the house. So you have two people typically, or you would hope you have two parties that are vested in trying to ensure that you have a good house. Remember, because if you're a tenant and you live in a house, the last thing you want to do is destroy your own place, at least for most of us. That's what we're about to get into. And so you have two parties whose motivation is to take care of this place. And so, the landlord assumes more risk, and therefore the landlord, in my opinion, tends to give a shit a little bit more, especially if they have a tenant who's on board. And then you have a recipe for success. But the tenant is absolutely destructive because they don't have no skin in the game. They're paying rent month to month, and maybe they have a 12-month lease, but if they stop paying, unfortunately these days the laws don't lend themselves to quickly identify that the person is not acting in good faith and get that motherfucker out of there. And I haven't had that experience, and I hope I never do. But that's part of the structure, right? Because the laws are there to protect the tenant against shitty landlords. Unfortunately, the law they don't put a lot of thought into it. The people who are writing laws and developing laws today are happy with copy paste of the antiquated law that was put on the book 150, 25 years ago, without giving any thought about lessons learned or modern ways of life. Why? Because it's hard. They'll say, well, there's no need to change. There's too much law. The law should progress with time, right? That's part of the problem. And we have enough people, we have enough resources. Maybe we don't have enough brain power, but we can train the brain power to continuously monitor our laws, become expert in what those things are and what is effective, no longer effective, what should be trim the fat, right? Because there's such a thing as too many rules, and tweak the rules to adjust for modern time and the way that we do things now. And you know, it's just telling, because the homeless crisis, there's way more a problem. There are more problems with squatting and things of that nature. So the laws are being passed are regressing now. Because of homelessness, there were a lot more laws, and COVID laws protecting the tenant, because they were, you know, landlords were beginning to be abusive, or if they haven't always been. And so you have a bunch of legislation. Look how fast they came up with that to protect the tenant, but they can't do that to roll back laws or reverse laws, or to write laws that have better balance that protect both the tenant and the landlord in the right way. Like, you don't hear that conversation. It's always one side against the other. And at least that's the way I've seen it. So let's talk shit about the tenant. So the first trolling trait for the tenant is the imposter. This is the guy or gal who rolls up, probably a nice car, good credit, well-behaved family. Everybody looks on the up and up. You've done all the vetting, and they look like the perfect candidate. You sign a lease, they get into the house, and before the ink is dried, the nightmare begins. They put on a good show to get into the house, and now they're just, because their personality sucks, because they're a piece of shit human being, because they're a troll on some level. Now your life is a living hell. The refrigerator never works, the heater never works. There's too many spiders. There's a crack on the wall that needs to be addressed. The paint needs to be done. The fucking list of fucking complaints never ends, and it won't end. The tenant is simply a piece of shit, and the landlord is stuck dealing with that stuff, because why? We have a lease, and as long as they're paying the money, good fucking luck getting rid of them. The laws are designed to protect the tenant for good reason, but those same protections work against the landlord frequently, and that's just wrong. There should be an intellectual discussion on how do we tease these different problems out. People always are, well, that's what do they say? Not that's the way it is. It is what it is. It isn't what it is. It isn't. 99 times out of 100, we could have more discussion about it to figure out what other problems could be solved. It's just intellectual laziness at this point. Fucking society, it is what it is to everything. Oh, look at the presidency. It is what it is. No, it isn't. We can improve that situation overnight if the right people give a fuck. But that's not the case. And it's the same thing with the imposter. You're kind of stuck with him because people wrote the laws lazily, and now you have a malignant fucking figure living in your home, but it's technically your home, and doesn't give a fuck to preserve it. Matter of fact, just uses it as a tool to make your life miserable, because there's something missing in their life. I mean, think about it. There's simply something that is not more important for them to keep their time occupied, as opposed to fucking with you. And I'm sorry about that. But anyway, if you're the imposter, and again, the imposter is a trait or characteristic that we can assign easily to other trolls. The imposter, we won't fucking get into that. But as you can see, all these characteristics are starting to nest, and it just makes you a bigger troll. Piece of shit. The squatter. Out of all the characteristics on my list of tenants, is the squatter that I hate the most. What the fuck is wrong with you? I understand maybe in the old days, you know, when people used to die and not tell anybody, or well, I guess you can't tell anybody, but they had nobody to inform. They had no family, or family lived far away, and you have a structure or dwelling that's just sitting there. Well, Bob, we ain't seen him in a year. I guess I'll just take over. Maybe it makes sense. Maybe there's a good reason to have a squatter policy. You know, things happen, and property becomes vacant, lots become vacant, and who was it? Oh, that nobody lays claim to this. What do we do with it? I don't know. I don't think we have a good system for that. But that opens the door to the squatter, especially now that you have this big homeless crisis, and you know you have what started off as a good cause by the social justice warrior has now been taken to the other extreme, where we're letting people live in places that they have no business in, that demonstrably they don't own and somebody else does. But the landlord's not landlord, you don't even have a fucking lease at that point. But the homeowner is stuck with dealing with, and the squatter will destroy. They're not going to pay any bills, so the electricity probably isn't on, the plumbing isn't on. So think of the human waste that's accumulating, which is typically part of the problem with the squatter. The trash, you know, you're not paying trash on a dwelling that you don't live in. So potentially trash could be accumulating, and it's worse than that. If you're paying bills on the structure and the squatter makes it in there, the squatter could lodge a complaint against you not providing services at that point, because when they move in, the services were established. And now you're paying for a squatter, to live in your house. If you don't believe me about those nightmare stories, look it up. The only reason I know about it is because it comes out on the fucking TV all the time now, about these squatters moving into fucking houses and destroying shit. You know, I was watching a documentary, and this guy found a squatter. He was, I wish I could remember his name. He's on YouTube. It's a fun series to watch, because he goes to the hood and he finds different issues. And in this particular segment, he was talking about squatters, and he found this squatter guy, or he was a drug guy, sorry, drug addicts. But he found this squatter in this one city, and he befriended him. And I guess a year or two later, he went back to that city and was looking for that certain drug addict squatter guy, and he found him, and he was living in somebody else's house, and he had fixed it all up. He was squatting, and he said, "Oh man, you know, nobody's here, so I'm improving the area," knowing damn well he's just being destructive. If you looked around, he was just being destructive. But the neighbors to the left and right, you know, they were saying, "Well, you know, we're happy he's here because it keeps an eye on the house, and we know him, and we know he's safe." Motherfucker, you've known it. What? One, it's not his house. Two, he's destroying fucking the property, and it's gonna potentially bring your property value down. Three, how do you know it's fucking safe? These people who are squatters, who live on the street, who have drug addiction, frequently, and I'm not saying all the time, have mental problems, and it might be something different than that. You might not have a home because you're a fucking criminal and nobody wants to have you, and there's a million scenarios that play out right there with the squatter, especially in my community next door, and that potentially could go wrong, because if that guy fucking pops a nut or a screw and starts capping somebody or does something destructive to the community, then people are going to say, "Oh, well, we didn't know. He seemed like a nice guy." Well, at a minimum, if you had a vetting system, like a landlord vetting a tenant, and have a proper lease, whoever the fuck moves in next door, maybe they're not a criminal. Frequently they still are, but at a minimum, we try to filter for that as a community, and you don't get that with the squatter. And beyond that, the squatter typically, let's move on, doesn't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about the laws. There's something up with them. I'll say there's something wrong with them. And they're not a real tenant, and they're a sloth. Think about the type of person who sees fit just to walk into somebody else's house and try to take over, and then not try to compensate whatsoever. That's on a different level than the mooch. These fucking squatters are fucking sloth. They want something. They want everything for nothing. Matter of fact, they want more than that, because as soon as they start being destructive, now I have to not only provide you a shelter, but fix whatever fucking damage you've caused. Fucking troll. Fuck you. All right, next type of tenant, the excuser. And what I mean by that is people who make excuses. I can't pay the rent because so and so, this whatever catastrophe is happening in my life. Make up an excuse. I got a flat tire. I've heard this one. Well, I put the money order in the slot. You didn't get it? No. Where's the proof? Show me your money order stub. Oh, I lost it. Fucking excuse. Make every excuse in the book not to pay the rent. Meanwhile, you have families out there struggling, clawing and gnawing to make, those extra $5 or $6, $7, $8 a week or a day so that they can make the rent on time, so that they can keep a roof over their head or their family's head. But these motherfuckers don't, look for every reason to do everything but. And, meanwhile, they have nice rims on their car. They have a luxury vehicle. They have an RV. They have all the toys in the house. But for some reason, they can't seem to come up with a rent. Bullshit excuses. And you're hurting that person that leased the house to you. That person frequently, and it less so these days because corporations are taking over. But typically it's a person, another citizen who's counting on that rental income as part of their income, as part of how they live their life and they pay their bills. Mind you, the structure you're living in, they probably have to pay a mortgage on that. So if they pay their mortgage diligently and responsibly on the first, and you're waiting till the fucking fifth, they're holding that debt until you pay them in reality. So there's usually a buffer, and I guess there's nothing wrong with working within that buffer. I think the landlord understands that's the deal. But if it's the 10th and you're still fucking making excuses as to why you can't pay it, but you have all the toys in your fucking yard and in your fucking house, and you have the money, you just don't want to pay, or you're mismanaging your funds, fucking troll. You got to get your priorities straight. A lease is a promise, and especially if you're a guy. If you promise something, you're supposed to fulfill your obligation. And even, not just guys, if you sign your name on a contract, guy or gal, as a person, you have to just feel obligated to follow through on what the things that you agree to, especially if it's a contract, because a contract is an official document. It codifies a promise. Maybe it's not as important as the promises we make abstractly to our loved ones to be faithful and stuff like that. However, it's still important. Matter of fact, that gets documented in the court. If you go to jail for not paying your rent, if you get evicted for not paying your rent because police reports have to be logged, et cetera, et cetera. So if you want your name getting codified in time on the ledger, on the legal ledger, as being a fucking shitty tenant, or being a bad agent of some sort, I guess that's up to you. But don't forget, you're going to want that next lease if you can't afford to purchase your own home. And if you have a bad reputation, I'm sure that gets logged somewhere. Especially maybe on your credit report. I don't know if landlords can report that to the credit bureau. I don't see why not. But you could potentially damage your credit then, if that's one of the cases. And you could hurt your future. So the troll, that type of troll, I don't understand. Like, you're not working in your best interest. And I'm not talking shit about people with real excuses. My mom died. I have to go to, wherever I have to take the family. We got to travel to the funeral. As long as there's verifiable evidence of the fact and your landlord's willing to work with you, that's a different story. Life happens. And in my opinion, people tend to be able to work things out if they're communicative about their issues. And I don't know a landlord, at least, I guess I don't know many landlords, but at least from my perspective, the limited perspective I have, a landlord who can be communicated with whom we can express our true dilemma with, where we can provide evidence, if they can support you, I imagine that they will. It's just a good, honest conversation about, the truth of what's going on. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the liars, the deceiters, the ones that make every excuse not to give up the rent. because they have other motives of some sort. Fucking troll. The next troll, the next tenant type of troll is a destroyer. So these are the people that don't give a fuck about the dwelling. Now, they probably don't care about their own lives, much less the dwelling that they live in. Much less if it doesn't belong to them. They have no skin in the game. The landlord will take care of that. Oh, Joey's making holes in the wall? Oh, how cute. I'm going to go over here and drink my beer. Call me when he's ready for dinner. It's fucking, I don't know how those people work. I don't tend to have typically have a destructive personality, but at least not in that context at all. I don't understand it. The destroyer's indifferent. That's the problem. Like, it's because it doesn't belong to them. It doesn't affect their life really, in the long term in any way or in a significant way. They don't give a fuck about your property. They don't care if you have turf. They're gonna let the dog piss and shit on it. They're not gonna clean it up. You know, your turf is gonna get destroyed because frequently, as a landscaping technique to save money on water, we use turf, which may or may not be an environmental mistake. I don't fucking whatever. Life's hard. Another discussion, but even if you have grass, they're not gonna fucking take care of that. The dog's gonna piss and shit on it or whatever. It's gonna get overgrown. They're gonna dig holes. They're gonna let the dog fuck it up. They're gonna let the dog chew up through the fucking whole house. The dogs and cats literally just piss everywhere. The fucking kids make a mess. They never clean up in the kitchen. I mean, the laundry list goes on. They just don't give a fuck about your house. In that particular subcategory, the destroyer, you also have children. And I don't blame children too much. It's on their parents to supervise them. But you have those parents who allow their kids to roam with like literally zero guidance or supervision. I let my kids roam pretty freely without supervision because I wanted them to learn about life. I wanted them to make mistakes. I wanted them to maybe break shit. Maybe not, but either way, make mistakes. But I didn't let them go out into the world without guidance. I said, watch out for this, watch out for that. Let's talk about this. Hey, what happened when you went out on this particular excursion? Well, what dilemmas did you run into? Let's talk about the scenarios. Let's have a discussion about what's going on in your life and how you're supposed to comport yourself out there. But they don't. They take no interest. The tablet and the television are probably this kid's babysitter. And when those aren't on or unavailable or too boring, the kid moves on to do something else. We've all heard the story about the kids who get bored and play with matches because that's just guidance, right? That's why you have the safety thing in elementary about playing with fire, playing with matches. Just don't do it is what they tell you. And it's the same thing with parenting. You're supposed to tell them, hey kids, don't play with matches. Don't break the walls. Don't write on the walls, especially if this place isn't yours, respect. You got to give back the things. It's that old tenet of borrowing something. Give it back the way it was given to you or better. But frequently, as we've all learned throughout our life, if you lend somebody something because it's not theirs, they'll abuse it and they'll use it up and they'll give it back to you and say, oh, I'm sorry, it broke. You gave me a piece of shit. No, I gave you a quality fucking product. You're a piece of shit. And because it was in your hands, it turned to fucking shit, you fucking troll. So you got the people who can't be trusted with your property. And a fucking house, oh my God, I think we've already outlined a lot of the things that go into taking care of a house, maintaining a house. And if you have somebody in there who doesn't give a shit, they're the eyes and ears on the ground in your home to what might be going wrong. And if they don't raise the alarm, if something big is happening, a foundational issue, a plumbing issue, that water's like horrific, if it's not mitigated, then your house could be destroyed by the time you get to it. And even though you have insurance, the landlord has to invest the time into coordinating all those things for all the repairs. If not, the landlord doing the work themselves to save money, because it's expensive to hire somebody to do that as well. All kinds of chaos. And that comes from these tenants, these destroyer type of tenants that don't watch their kids, and then they don't give a shit about your property, so they don't care if their children don't either. So what you end up with is literally a family, an army of people destroying your house, allowing it to go to shit. Man, that's scary. Next, pets. So the destroyer, just like they don't give a fuck about um, their children or their pets, these people are indifferent. Like there's a component in them that's flawed or missing that tells them that they're supposed to address these living entities in their life, their children and their pet, and they're supposed to give them guidance or at least some type of structure so that they don't break shit inappropriately, so that they don't destroy stuff inappropriately. And I use the word inappropriately is because shit will happen, things are gonna break. But I'm talking about these landlords that let the dog do whatever they do and they think it's cute. When there's a 3-foot hole in the backyard, and now you have to come back and backfill it and tamp it and lay down new sod or new turf or whatever the fuck it is to fix it. Maybe that's just a minor endeavor, but multiply that times the 100 other things that the dog is going to destroy, chewing up stuff, digging holes, fucking biting the neighbors, biting passersby, just being a general nuisance. Along with some crazy kids that have no guidance, whose parents are fucked up. That's a recipe for disaster for your property. So the tenant, in that fashion, can become a high level troll. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say it that way. They can become, I don't know, a troll who's just a pain in the ass on such a level, because what happens there is, again, they're energy vampires, they're time vampires. They're gonna suck up all your time because now you gotta fix all that shit that they destroyed, and then you gotta hope that you didn't miss anything, because are there now any issues behind the wall, like mold and stuff like that? If are there urine spots that I missed that now I can't get out the fucking stench out of this fucking house? Fucking destroyer, fucking troll, piece of shit. Pets. All right, handyman. This is a special destructive type of personality. There are two types of handyman here. You got the handyman who's trying to save a buck or trying to move on with their life and not bother you as a landlord for minor repairs, and they try to bet their best to fix something in good faith again, but they're just not up to the task. Multiplied times 10 good intentions. The what is it called? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Perform with good intention, but horrible results. 10 little projects can turn into a nightmare for the landlord. So if you're the handyman and you're not competent, even though you'd like to be in that arena, and you practice it 10 times on somebody else's house, by the way, maybe it's time to call when there's something wrong. Nothing against people trying. Everybody should make the effort to learn something. But we also have to understand when we're beyond our depth in a particular thing. Or better yet, I, as a landlord, desire to have a standard way of doing things throughout the house, so that when something goes wrong, the process used to fix or address that issue tends to be the same every time, and that just saves a lot of time. It allows me to budget, know how much money it's probably going to cost, who I need to call, how long it's going to take, what conveniences the tenants are going to go through, etc. And all that can be discussed up front before you sign your lease. But even when it's not, when you have an issue, as long as we're communicating, we can communicate the process to the tenant. And if you have a tenant who's worth the shit, usually you can come to that compromise and say, hey man, just hit me up whenever there's a problem. You don't have to fix it yourself. Matter of fact, please don't. I think people can respect that. And then there's the other type of handyman. I'm going to make these enhancements on the property on behalf of the landlord. I'm sure he'll appreciate it. There are two types of handymans there. One of them actually thinks that, and in complete ignorance, tried to put a new shed in the backyard and fucking puts a shanty back there, and it's just become the fucking hazard for the rest of the community. Or you have the handyman who isn't quite satisfied with the structure or the things, the amenities or whatever in the structure, and they're gonna make it their own, under the guise that they're enhancing it, or I have a lease on this place, I could do whatever I want, which isn't the case. Typically, it's written right in the lease. No structural modifications. Any modifications need to go through the landlord and be approved by the landlord. And if they're approved by the landlord, there'll be an agreement as to whether it's going to be done, can be done by the tenant, or a professional handyman or service has to come and install or execute that whatever improvement on the house. And sometimes that happens, right? Hey, this shelf isn't quite functional. Landlord, can we do something else here? I'll split the cost. Like, tenants who give a shit about their environment are willing to put some skin in the game. But I'm not talking about those, obviously. I'm talking about these fucking pieces of shit who add another shelf where it doesn't belong. They use the particle board. They don't measure anything. It looks like a fucking 3-year-old did it. But it's a masterpiece of them. Or better yet, they don't give a fuck about how it looks. It's not their house. So they're just going to put up whatever and use it while they're there, and then they're going to fucking leave. And they're like, why am I going to invest all this money on this structure when I don't even own the house? Well, why the fuck are you putting it there in the first place? It's because they're lazy. They don't want to invest the time or resources it's going to take to do the thing right. Frequently, somebody will have a preference about your house, and they want to put a thing, or a gazebo, or a shed, or a shelf, or they want to modify the cabinetry for some reason because it's not functional, quote unquote. And you just have to say no. Well, a lot of them just take the liberty of, either just not asking and doing it, or asking, getting denied, and doing it anyway. So these destroyers, these handymen, these supposed competent people, because the handyman, in my opinion, is really competent. I wish I could be a handyman. The motherfuckers make a lot of money. They could do a lot of different shit. But these are pseudo handymen. They fucking don't know how to do shit, and they're working on your house. So let an incompetent adult loose with a hammer in your house, and see how much fucking handy stuff gets done. It won't be very handy at all. Fucking troll, the destroyer. And lastly, the last one I came up with was the hoarder. So underneath the tenant troll is the hoarder troll. And these hoarders, that's not complicated. They just hoard. They save everything. Every scrap, every piece of junk mail, every newspaper that comes through. As a matter of fact, these people go out and collect stuff to hoard. And they can do so quite quickly. And it's a huge detriment to the structure. Everything about the house begins to suffer because of that. It could be the plumbing, the structural foundation, the floor, especially because where you set it up the shit on the floor initially. It becomes crowded, and within all that clutter, it invites pests. If you watch the show Hoarders, you can just look for yourself at the demonstration of what happens when somebody has a hoarding condition. And in my opinion, it doesn't take a lot of stuff to qualify as hoarding. Too many pieces of furniture in a crowded place, and then you start to put stuff on it. It doesn't, that clutter is not functional. There's no use. The only reason it exists is to be there. There's some sort of emotional compulsion to save these things in this place, even though the stuff doesn't serve any purpose. And that's a scary condition for the landlord, because I don't envy the cleanup job that comes with cleaning up after a hoarder. Not to mention the smell, which might permeate the structure permanently. And if that's the case, that might involve tearing out drywall, tearing out all the cabinetry, tearing out all the counters, tearing out anything that isn't bolted on that could be contributing to the smell, and redoing the damn thing. And how much does that cost? I can't imagine what the bill would be to come and clean up after a hoarder, especially if you have a very bad condition inside the house. If you're a tenant and you're a hoarder, you're a fucking troll. And I feel for you. Usually hoarders have some sort of emotional issue that needs to be addressed, but it's a serious emotional issue, and you need to get help. And if you have loved ones who are operating that way, we've seen the show, right? If once you get them help, they tend to do some of them, not all of them, tend to do better. but you have to make the effort. It starts with the self. So if you're the hoarder, go get help. I feel for you, and I'm sorry I'm talking shit, but you're a troll, and stop doing that shit. If you identify the hoarder and you're an enabler, or you're making the effort to help that person, good luck. Don't assist the troll, or don't feed the troll. All right, and the last one in the tenant troll subcategory, the tick. That's the one. That is the legitimate tenant. Signed a lease. He's in your home. He's not the tenant you want, or the lease is expired, or whatever scenario plays out. They have a legal claim to live in the dwelling. They're the tick. That's the tick. He's the one you can't get out because they have a legal reason to be in there, and they're holding on to that legal reason like it's a Bible, like it's the word, it's the gospel, because they're just like the squatter. The exception is that they got in there through legitimate means, and now they kind of straddle that line between the squatter and the tick. Matter of fact, they are the tick, right? With the squatter quality. So you start. So you got the tenant with the squatter, and the tick, troll nested within one another, and that's just, horrendous. Once you start stacking troll characteristics, the condition can only be much worse. The experience can only be much worse for the landlord. The ticks are hard to get rid of. They're related to the squatter. Got it. And they understand how the law and the rules work. That's even worse, because the tick is leveraging the legitimacy of his or her presence in the dwelling. And that's the challenge. And now the landlord has to invest a bunch of time, probably money, in the form of a lawyer, or working with the city or the county or whatever, because the rules are complicated, probably all the above, to work to get rid of that person that's in that house. But because they have rights and they understand the rules and the laws, and they enter the dwelling through legitimate means, it's even harder to get rid of them. I don't understand these people who are proud. I got away with paying rent for 24 months. I'm like, okay, bitch. What did that get you? They're probably still in the same situation, just in a different location. But everybody else gets hurt in that. You have a person who's maybe their only source of income is renting out their place. And they're out all that income for those 24 months. And that matters. That person put in their some sort of sweat equity into providing a dwelling for somebody to stay in. In a time where we don't have enough rental properties, we don't have enough homes just in general to house the population in the United States, you are going to suck up and consume a place that you're not going to pay for, where you have 10 people lined up who are more than willing to do the right thing and give the landlord market value for that dwelling, and they can live in it and live a quality life without all the drama, without causing all this consternation, without causing all this damage, really, for the landlord. Not just the landlord, but again, there's a direct impact on society, especially with an item like a home, like a house. It's a huge, I don't know what you would call it, because housing is so important to everybody all over the planet. But in this country, having a home it's a big deal. And so denying somebody access to that through your trolling behavior is a different level of harm, I think. Simply because housing is just so fundamental to our survival, to our existence, to living, especially in a modern society like ours, where we would all die without the refrigerator. We'd probably all starve to death. We might die in the elements because we don't know how to stay warm unless we're inside a fucking house. Things of that nature. So shelter is really important. It's detrimental to our health, just in general, but more so because we live in this modern society where we don't know how to function and survive, literally survive, live without all the amenities that a home provides, especially in the Western world. because they don't teach us how to live off of nature. All right. And then the tick, the last component of the tick, which is the one that pisses me off the most. They are enabled by the state, very much like the squatter. They have more rules, more laws and rules to protect them than the landlord. In those relationships, there are humans involved, and on both sides of that topic, housing, right, the squatter versus the landlord, there are components on each side that are very important for both parties. One is the demand that I get my rent, because I do have to probably pay a mortgage on this structure. Not only that, that money is going to go to pay for anything that you have that I need to address, especially in case of an emergency, like a water heater. That's $1,000. Oh, I live in California. It's probably more like $1,600. And or you plumbing. Man, I had a plumbing issue a while back. It only, you could say it only cost me $325, but in an era where I forget the fucking number, where like 60% of Americans don't have $500 in the savings account. That's a lot of fucking money for a landlord to come up with. I don't care who you are. So if the tenant isn't paying their money, then it could impact the quality of life for the tenant, but also it could financially endanger the landlord if they're living on the margins for whatever reason. On the flip side of the coin, a horrific landlord could be destructive to a person's peace of mind. Remember, a tenant is renting. There are a million reasons for renting, and I think sometimes people rent because they see it as being a better option. It's a better value than purchasing a home. It just depends on where we're at in our lives. I think that's the determining factor there most of the time as to why we're renting. A lot of the time it's simply because we can't afford our own. I don't know many people who are not working towards a goal of owning their own home one day. Why? Because we want our own structure. We want not just an asset that can appreciate in value, but also a dwelling where we can make rules and govern ourselves the way we see fit. So that if I'm a destroyer, it's my fucking house. Nobody else's fucking business. If I'm an excuser, my fucking house. If I lose it, hopefully nobody else is affected. If you have kids, I mean, you're not thinking about your kids, but that's just me. And again, barring catastrophe and emergencies, right? Don't fucking troll me. The landlord-tenant relationship is really important. And I think it's important for both parties, both actors, to consider what the other one has to go through if something isn't functioning properly. Again, things are going to happen, but that's why we have communication. That's why we learn how to talk. That's why we learn decorum. That's why we learn what the words mean, so that we can use the best words to address the problem we have, so that the other side will understand exactly what's happening, so that we can solve problems, so that we can work together. And sometimes maybe we just have to come to the understanding that the landlord might agree just to be more patient on the rent, or lenient on the rent this month or for the next couple months, depending on what's going on in the tenant's life. Or that if the landlord makes a demand, like pay me the rent on time, that you have to understand that there's typically a reason behind that. The first one would be you agree to it. That's the bottom line. If you agree to pay your rent on time through a contract, there's no doubt about what your intention was. Do it. If you have the money, right? You should be doing it, and you should be budgeting, and you should be paying your rent on time. Again, it seems like a very simple transaction to me. You take care of the dwelling, I'll give you the fucking money and leave me alone. You pay me the rent, I'll take care of the dwelling, and I'll leave you alone. Have your privacy. I'll come in and inspect on occasion, because that is called due diligence. I'd be ignorant if I just didn't come in there and look on occasion. And I hope that you appreciate that I'm willing to do that. Not only that, if you let me in for you're going to let me in for the inspection, because I'm going to come and look. If I see something that you missed, if I see something that could be enhanced, I might actually see a issue that you don't recognize, or an enhancement I can make that you don't recognize that I could provide at the time. For example, like I don't, maybe a gazebo, a pergola or something. We could all benefit from having that here. Hey, I'm gonna bring that. It comes from permitting the inspections and stuff. A bunch of different things. A bunch of good things can happen if we learn how to communicate and work through our problems. Especially in this time where housing is so expensive. The landlord-tenant relationship needs to be improved. Best I can tell. You have other issues right now that are making it hard to get housing, especially leased housing, because you have investors who are coming in and buying up desirable houses, desirable property, but they're Airbnb-ing it. So that shrinks the number of available long-term rentals for the locals. We have that problem all over the country. I mean, in San Diego, they're passing laws and they're only allowing X amount of Airbnb, but that leads to another problem. Is like, why can't I be in control of my own property and do whatever the fuck I want with it, including rent out a room if I desire so, to make some extra money, because inflation is high, because the government, again, where they're trying to solve a problem, they are the problem. And so a bunch of different things there. So the landlord-tenant relationship, in my opinion, is even more important to get right these days. There are people who need to rent a home because they really just can't afford it. That's it. And if the landlord doesn't act, with a good heart and a good faith to provide what they say for that tenant, or make it cost prohibitive for them to even enter the dwelling, then that's part of the problem. And I don't know a way around that one, because I wouldn't tell a landlord to sell themselves short and not rent at market value. But when your market value, for example, here in San Diego, I don't know what the average rent is for any particular structure, but what I've seen, you do a 3-bed, 2-bath house, you're talking about rent that's anywhere between $3,000 and $4,000. And so if you're bringing first month's rent and deposit, which usually equals first month's rent, a lot of times more, but they just passed a law here said you can't do more than first month's rent for the deposit. Fucking crazy. $3,000 to $4,000 times 2 is $6,000 to $8,000 just to move into a place. And if you've ever moved, I don't care who you are, it's expensive to move, because you have to come back with different things, like you have to now buy trash bags, you have to repopulate the home with just some staple stuff, shower curtains, trash cans, like all that stuff is expensive. When it adds up, in the aggregate, all that stuff is very expensive. So I encourage you, if you're a landlord or if you're a tenant, when it comes to that relationship, be on your best behavior. Put your best foot forward. Do your homework and ask the search engine or the version of AI you like to use. Hey, how can I be a good landlord? How can I be a good tenant? What is a bad landlord? Maybe you want to study the other side and see exactly what they're supposed to be delivering on. What is a good tenant? Maybe you're a new landlord and you want to be mindful of how you should be treating these people, or what you should be monitoring if you're the cautious type. What is stepping over the line? What is within my purview? Maybe you do want to do the inspection once a month. It maybe just depends on who's in there. You have to have legitimate justification, though, and legitimate is subjective. But I think, if you're being a bad actor, if you have ulterior motives to do the inspection or to treat your tenant a certain way, you're probably a troll. You're a fucking troll. Fuck it. You know it. All right. So, like I started off, if you're wasting time out here, get after it. The fuck off the internet and go do your thing. Landlords and tenants can be a detrimental troll on many levels. Housing is important. It's kind of tied to the heart, right? Home. And we need to stop fucking with each other about that. We need to take this housing thing more serious, and our smart people, our engineers, somebody needs to help us look at the housing issue and come up with a better way of managing it. Because the current system is okay, but we all see very easily that there's a lot of room for improvement. Have a good day.